In the first video, we said time is a key theme in Surah Fajr. We will go through a quick reminder of the surah's summary before we move on to today's verses. In the previous videos, we contrasted the people who possessed spiritual intellect mentioned in verse 5 with the people who possessed power to build nations in verses 6 through 13. Right in the center of this group of verses, Allah mentioned that He is ever watchful. Then the topic of the verses went back to discussing the characteristics of the people who lacked spiritual intellect, and we covered this in the last video. Today we will cover the last verses of Surah Fajr when the end of time arrives. We will see how time will branch off differently for those who regret and for those who return to Allah in contentment and pleasure. Now we see how the ending verses return to the theme of time. The earth is not calm and synchronized anymore. Please notice that the words are repeated twice to create emphasis. In verse 21, Allah says, when the earth will be crushed and flattened. Allah repeats dakkan twice, which means crushed. So the earth will be pounded and crushed. Dakkan dakka. Next, Allah mentions His mighty presence now, since the time for judgment has arrived. And to emphasize the strength of power, the angels standing in rows are mentioned twice. Safan, safa. So it creates a powerful image of the end of time with the earth collapsing. Yawm is mentioned twice in verse 23. The meaning of Yawm includes day or night and refers here to the day of judgment. First, Yawm is mentioned in its coming along with hell for those people who did not possess the spiritual intellect that was discussed before. Again, Yawm is mentioned in the context of the same irrational person who was too busy with materialism in this world and did not remember Allah. So this remembrance, a dhikr, is also mentioned twice in this verse for emphasis, since this person paid no attention to Allah's swearing by time that was mentioned in the beginning of the surah. Now it's time for regret and punishment. Remember, as I said earlier, time is a key theme in the surah. The person regrets in verse 24, saying, "Oh, how I wish I had done some good deeds during my life." Again, we notice the repetition of words for emphasis. Allah's azab, meaning punishment, is mentioned twice in verse 25. No one will give azab like His azab. May Allah protect us, Ya Rab. And no one will bind as Allah's binding. The word wathaq, meaning binding, is mentioned twice for highlighting this point. Now comes the precious time for the people of intellect that was mentioned earlier in the surah. Allah refers to them so dearly as the reassured soul returning to Allah. Ya ayyuhan nafsul mutma'inna. This soul is reassured because it understood the importance of time and spent it in remembering Allah. This soul returns to Allah pleased with itself, with no regrets, and is also so pleasing to Allah. Notice, pleasing is mentioned twice in verse 28 to emphasize Allah's pleasure with this soul who's also so content. Allah welcomes this group of people to enter paradise, and this entrance is mentioned twice. First, Allah asks this soul to enter with Allah's other righteous servants. So now they're with the best companions. And the second is the soul's grand entrance to the paradise of Allah. Allah says, "Wadkhuli jannati." Allah welcomes them by saying, "Enter my Jannah." I have a book on Amazon where I have explained the verse connections of Surah Al-Baqarah and Al-Imran. If you have benefited from this video, please like, subscribe, comment, and keep watching this series. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.